Danny, and welcome everybody again to this October webinar. And as Danny said, we're going to take a little journey, and it's going to be me centric because it's what I remember and what I've thought about quite a bit over the years, just in terms of technology and how it's developed just in my time in beekeeping, but we'll go a little bit backwards from that as well. So, again, it's going to just share some of my thoughts. It's not going to be a deep history. We don't have time for that, and nor am I an expert in that. And probably some of you have some good insight as well. But I want to just take a big flyover, and there'll be plenty of places there that you might want to go look at further, dig into, just drop some little crumbs of if you're curious, you can look further along. So, all right, Danny, let's go to the next. So again, we're going to talk about my bee yard, where we are, where you might want to things you might want to do, and then this beekeeping technology history, and then Q&A. All right, so let's get to the first order of business, and that's our bees and your bees. So for me at Faith Mountain Farm, since our last webinar, we've really transitioned. Then we were kind of, it was early mid-fall, had not really had big frost or anything yet. Maybe I'd had one. This picture here is early October. We had already had a pretty heavy frost. I had a huge pollinator patch in my yard on my farm. And actually, this is a nice little subplot. We'll come back to it. I've talked about it different times, but this was a project with NC State, a grant project they had, and studying pollinators post-flood in our region. And so it's been a really good year for the pollinator plot, but clearly its time is limited. In fact, it looks much different now. It's all dead. Um, and so the question this time of year, really for us as beekeepers, are we ready for winter? Are there final things that we need to do to wrap up the winter prep? You likely have been doing things like I have for the past, you know, 6, 8 weeks as we transition to the colony into winter mode. These are repeats from last time, but they bear repeating, and sometimes these don't all happen at once, especially with reducing space. I've found that sometimes I'll leave a super, again, I like to overwinter in single deeps, and in that case, sometimes I'll have another super that I'm just giving them a little bit of space for a brief period of time, and then I'll shake the bees down and get them as tight as possible is really what I'm after. Just no less empty space, the better, in my opinion. Also, continuing to monitor feed, and if there's some spot feeding, somebody's light, or some particular yard doesn't have as much honey stores as others, then you might need to feed those. I found that this fall as well. Some places did better than others in terms of fall flow. And then another thing you can do, and we'll get into this also with Hive Tracks kind of to-dos, that would be just making note of the cluster size or the population of your bees. And we know that they're transitioning, or some have already transitioned maybe into that winter population size. And so you want to see what that is right now. And that's just a good marker that then you can monitor, make sure you're maintaining that size, maybe going down a little bit. But you want to know what that is right now and kind of record that. For me and my operation, if you not familiar with my bee operation, I'm in the mountains of North Carolina, so we tend to move our bees to a lower elevation, and so that we can get an earlier start in spring. For me, it's not so much the cold. It's more of I can get an early start in the spring on growing the hives out at lower elevations. So that's my motivation for moving, which means I don't have to hurry, or I'm not in a hurry to move the bees, but I'll probably do that in the next month or two. And then for me, I was very slow this year in extracting my honey. So I've got a honey room that needs some love and cleaning up. So got a couple of pictures, I think, from the fall as well. So this is kind of not you don't want to always share the good pictures, but the one on the left is a very healthy good population, and what you want to see this time of year, at least I do. And the one on the right, clearly there was something wrong with one or both of these hives. And if you recognize this, I'm newspapering these together. So this is a combination of colonies. And if I remember, the one on the top had very low population, but had a the queen was still good and good and laying, and the other one was a little shaky on the queen. And so I just combined them together, plus added a good shot of feed. So again, you're going to have different health of bees this time of year and doing what you need to do for each one. All right, what's next? As I said, in some of my yards, I had actually a decent fall flow, and this is from a hive scale. And this particular yard was a yard that had no honey the rest of the year. These bees almost starved. I think I had them in a slide back in August, and I got them through that by feeding them. But then this is a nice little boost. You can see they had 18-pound gain in a couple of weeks at the end of September, and very thankful for that. I didn't have to feed those anymore. All right, next slide. Now, of course, you're all going to cross this path. Well, those of you who have winter, you can see a nice zinnia there on the left, but that was its last day of life because it got frozen that day. And we've had at my place several freezes. This one, the 23 degrees Fahrenheit, was last Friday. And the picture on the right is from that morning. There's some bees over on the right-hand side. You can see them tucked in the edge of that picture. But again, we are definitely heading into the cold time of year. You want to have all your winter preparations done. And we'll still have warm days, but in this case, there's no forage out there for them. So anything that they get is going to have to be in the hive. So next slide. So with hive tracks in the fall, there's several things that I suggest that you use your hive tracks for. One of those things is like on that previous slide, uh, add a record to your yard showing when you had the frost or the freeze or whatever recognition that the forage is decreasing out there, and you can create a record for that. So you can use the other record in the Hive Tracks app and record that. You can also use it. I'm finding new ways to use Hive Tracks, and one of those is kind of in the honey harvest and then the extraction and then the bottling. You can actually record those events as well within the Hive Tracks app, again, using this other record or the harvest. There is a harvest honey record as well. And all those things will feed in eventually to your honey story. And we're going to be talking more about that next month. And we've been promoting it as well. And so those are all things that can contribute to the information that's in your honey story. A couple of other things that you could do is if you're doing yard maintenance, whether you're maintaining your hive stands or you're cleaning up the yard or you're moving things around, recording those hive tracks can do that as well. And then you've got an entire record of the history of everything that you've done with that particular yard. You can also do things to make notes for next season that you want to remember. Uh, Also, you can do a retro looking back if there's things that you forgot to record or you were slack in recording your notes. Maybe you have some notes somewhere else that you want to fill in now's a good time in the downtime. And then finally, this other feature of Pro that we have with sharing, your yards or your apiaries and hives with other folks, other beekeeping friends, or people in the club, then now would be a great time to experiment with that. What I've got here on the screenshot I have here, you can see on the right, I have this is one of my backyard beehive customers, and you can see I have honey delivery. So I made a note of when I took honey to that particular client, along with other events for that particular apiary. So it's just an example of kind of the log and history you can have with your apiaries. All right. So that's kind of where we are with and you're at some phase of that, except for Australian friends, which you're in the springtime. So you're on the front edge of your season. And yeah, we're happy for you. Hope you have a great season. But we're going to go into hibernation over here. So, all right. Next segment is again, this is a flyover of uh, technology development, and these two pictures here are kind of two ends of my life. The one on the left is me. I'm in the little tank top there. That's my dad talking about bees to I think it was my fifth grade class. Were over at my house. He was an educator. He was a beekeeper. We had bees in our backyard, and he loved talking about bees. And so beekeeping then, that would have been about 1975. Okay, so beekeeping technology in 1975 was very different from the right-hand photo, which is my son Sullivan in probably 2015, 16, somewhere in there. And if you look closely at the picture on the right, you can see a few different pieces of technology. There's tags on the hive. Those are from the Bee Informed Partnership Sentinel Apiary Program. There's also a hive scale you can see there. And so my point is that from that moment on the left to the right, a lot of things happened in the digital space, and that's primarily where I'm coming from in this history. Although I'm going to throw a few little nuggets in there for you to look at before that, and so I want to cover kind of that time frame of what's happened in the digital space. All right, so this is I don't know. This is just fascinating to me. This Francois Huber, again, I might not pronounce it correctly, but if you're not aware of him, I highly recommend you go just do a look at the Wikipedia for him. He was blind. He went blind early in his life, but he continued to study honeybees and made a lot of the discoveries that we take for granted now. One of the big ones being that the queen bee mates outside the hive. Again, so he's a blind beekeeper, and he's discovered that queens mate outside the hive, among a lot of other things. And there's a nice, easy read historical fiction book called The Beekeeper's Pupil that will give you some insight into his life and how he did that. But on the side here is an image of this observation hive that he made that had these leaves in it that you fold. So anyway, if you've never heard of him, this is your free factoid of the day to go pursue that. All right, next one. So pre-2000s, and these are again just some kind of interesting points of interest that if you want to go look back, this apodictor patent. Um, by the way, there was Langstrauss patent of the of his hive that we still use today. That was in the 1800s, and a lot of other developments along the way. But these are some that kind of have elements that relate to our technology today. Because one of the things that people like to do with sensors today is listen to a hive and to the sound that it makes. And there was work going on, in the 1950s to measure and record the sound. And the holy grail has always been, is my hive going to swarm? And can I predict that? So this was one of those attempts to do that. And then there were a number of thermoregulation experiments, so temperature inside the hive. There's technology has, gives us temperature sensors inside the hive, and even thermal imaging, things like that in today. But there are experiments going on, before about how do honeybees manage the temperature in the hive. So those are interesting as well. So coming up to the technology in the 80s really is when personal computers were became more common, widespread, became a thing, and people began to record information, notes, things about their bees, even with spreadsheets. And then pretty quickly in the 90s, by the way, for those of you who are really young, the internet didn't exist before the mid 90s. And so things like web forums or email lists, like your B source, and BL is a fascinating sort of subculture within the beekeeping universe. If you're not familiar, there's a tool, technology tool called a listserv. It's essentially an email list, super common. Your common kind of thing. Back then, it was a way to disseminate information, and there were these news groups and things, but it was all driven by email. That was the communication platform. And so there was a list called B-L, and it is still going strong today. I get a summary every day of posts in this BL list. So it's one of those early technologies that's still going strong and has pretty useful information in it. All right, so again, not a lot happening other than just kind of normal communication, record keeping. And so let's fast forward into the 2000s. And really one you'll see one of my purposes here. There's some events that happened. In fact, one event in particular that happened in the '06, '07 that with the first colony collapse disorder got its name and those events. But prior to that time, that's why I divided this at 2000 to 2007. There were some folks in there who were doing interesting work in technology. And if you've been around bee technology or looking at it or paying attention, one of the names that are likely to have seen is Jerry Bromanshank. And when I first started having these ideas about hive tracks, which that was in 2008, was kind of my first idea, I started looking around and say, who is doing work in this area? And Jerry's name was the one. He was doing all sorts of interesting things with counting bees, hive scales, doing grant work with bees, doing landmine detection. Can we use bees to detect a scent of explosives, things like that? So all sorts of fascinating things that Jerry was doing. And he's continued to this day. I mean, he's still super active, and you know pursuing ideas in the technology space. Another one that I ran into as part of my Be Informed partnership work was Wayne Assayas, and he was using manual agricultural scales. So you've probably seen these big platform scales. Um, these big platform scales that maybe at a feed store, the place I buy seeds, they still have one of these, and it's just a platform. And then you slide the little weights to get the how much it weighs, and so placing a beehive on those and then taking readings every day is historically been a way of weighing hives, and it works. And so Wayne started a project around that then developed into some hive sensors that had data loggers on them. And there was this really cool project. The link is there, and you may have seen that, but that was one that was kind of in this window of time. The B Source Forum, which if you've been in the looking at bee questions and answers and forum type places, B Source is kind of the granddaddy of those. and it actually started in 1999. And believe it or not, YouTube started during that, that window of time. And my first video that was posted to YouTube was a swarm catching video. And that was in 2007 in my front yard at the farm where I live right now. So again, those are some of the early movements in the technology space that yeah, are going to bear fruit later on. So okay, so what happened? In 2006, 2007, if you know your history of beekeeping in the US in particular, that winter was when there were sort of unexplained, uh, we went back a slide. There was unexplained losses, big losses in the commercial beekeeping space, and alarm bells went off, and the health of honeybees was vaulted into the public consciousness, and it's not gone away since that time. If you didn't know before that time, honeybees, they were just, beekeepers were doing their thing. There were beekeeping clubs, obviously, and all this, but the public was kind of not so much aware of what was going on. And so the colony collapse disorder events that happened, by the way, that term was just created to describe the symptoms of those events that were going on. And it was never really determined what was causing that. But the name stuck and it's been used since then, rightly or wrongly. It's out there in the wild. But that moment in time created this public awareness that moved attention both from the public, but also from government funding, from nonprofits, things like that, wanting to understand honeybee health. And as a result of a lot of that attention, for me, actually, that's what moved me into creating Hive Tracks in the first place. Was those events caused people at the farmers market to ask me how my bees were doing, which had never happened in the past, and it got my wheels turning of what can I do to kind of help address these problems. And so first mobile and really applications came about. Hive Tracks was one of those early ones. Tight was another one. They were released exactly the same year that Hive Tracks was released, and just recently Tight shut down. And so they've been going for a long time as well. But the first ones were right there in 2010. There were also hardware producers who were coming on during that time. Arnia is one. If you are familiar with Hugh Evans, he was the founder creator of that, and Hugh is still working in that space. Arnia has gone away. They've reappeared as another company, which you'll find in all of this. If some technology goes away, it might reappear as somebody else in somebody else's business. Solution B, many of you are familiar with them. They're a high scale producer. It's one of those that I use. They've been around since 2013. Broodminder came into existence in 2015. And all those hardware producers right there, they came about, and I became familiar with them with my work with a Bee Informed Partnership, the next link there. And I got to interact with kind of the whole bee research community in the US, plus the commercial community, the technology community. And so I was kind of embedded in the technology development during those years. And Bee Informed Partnership drove some of that technology development as well. I was the IT lead for that, so I was intimately involved and familiar with the kinds of things that were happening there. And so we were creating tools for this data collection and in particular Varroa focus, sampling for Varroa. There was this Sentinel apiary program that image of Sullivan, my son, with the hives with the tags on them. That was from the Sentinel apiary program where we were monitoring Varroa all summer long and nosema levels, sending them to the lab. Again, very intense data collection, but supported by technology so that we can understand what's going on with Varroa. Also, at that time, there was a scale portal, which this was a really good idea, and I hate to see that it's not still available, although there are elements of it in some of the other scale producers, and it was a public portal where you could see scale data from any geographic location for beekeepers that wanted to share that data. And again, I still think that's a great idea and somebody should do it. But that was something that we built within Hive Tracks, I mean, within Bee Informed Partnership that would help disseminate some of the information around hive scales and weight and nectar flows, things like that. All right, so that takes us to 2015, and the next segment of time is 2015 to 2020. And 2015, there was some other things going on in terms of technology development, and one of those was in New Zealand in particular. And you say, well, what does New Zealand have to do with this? Well, if you're familiar with Manuka honey, okay, and Manuka honey is one of those varietal special honeys, commands a premium price, and there was somewhat of a gold rush going on in New Zealand because Manuka was gaining in popularity in terms of an export valuable product. And so the beekeeping industry within New Zealand was responding to that demand for Manuka and, just increasing their production. And there was actually money flowing into beekeeping operations, kind of from the business world, recognized this as a business opportunity. And so there was money flowing into the technology development because a lot of the beekeeping operations, to be honest, were still in, you know, paper and pencil or whiteboards or the spreadsheets, at best, a spreadsheet. And so this moment of time in New Zealand, the Manuka was driving it. And actually in the US, there was some movement in that direction as well. And there was a bit of drama in the commercial beekeeping space. A company called I think it's Paramount Farms, and then they became Wonderful, uh, bought a commercial beekeeping operation. So there was this kind of attention being brought to the beekeeping industry, the big pollination industry, of business interests, seeing it as a business opportunity. And along with that was the technology development. If you see the what would happen there, if somebody's coming in from the outside and saying, "Hey, we need technology here," and so there was money again flowing in. So in this window of time, this 2015 to 2020, there was a lot of resources flowing into the development of technology, primarily driven by business interests. And at the same time, Be Informed Partnership was continuing to be to mature, and it became a nonprofit and started some additional programs like Mite Check program. We shared mite data on this map of what were the varroa loads in any geographic location. Hive Tracks actually participated in that by sharing information back to Be Informed Partnership. At my university here at Appalachian State, one of my colleagues, Ramon Tashikori, he started a project which is still going today in using bee technology sensors inside the hive and with video and audio sensors to evaluate bee health. Um, Mobile apps at this time in 2010, mobile was not big. It had just begun, and I mean, our first phones were in 2008-ish. And but in this 5 year window, mobile apps became easier to create and build. And so anybody with the idea could kind of create a mobile app. So there's a proliferation of mobile apps for beekeeping space. And then there were some specialty ones. In particular, there was a bee scanning app out of Sweden that was beginning to use image processing. We'll talk a little bit about this at the very end of the potential for that. But it was an app that you could take pictures of a frame and it would count the varroa mites on that frame on the bees, which was pretty fascinating. And they didn't make it as far as a business or an app, but the technology they used was good and was working. And again, it's just an example of how people were applying technology. Um, Also, at the same time, in this commercial beekeeping space, which again is a bigger big ag application, if you will, not to talk negative of it, but it's just as part of our big agriculture systems that we have. We have to have big pollination to go along with that. And so managing hives at that level requires a different kind of application, and several came about. My apiary out of New Zealand, there's one in the US called the Bee app. Hive Tracks tried to get into that space as well. And like I say, there was partly driven by this Manuka market in New Zealand. Interesting footnote: China was one of the biggest importers of Manuka honey, and they wanted traceability to make sure that they were getting real Manuka honey. Sorry, my phone just woke up and started talking. Um, and so China drove some of the development of the technology because they wanted traceability of the Manuka honey, which is a bit ironic if you understand the history of honey and China. But anyway, so this commercial hive management software got its real start then, and it's still trying to penetrate the market, and there's still some of those alive. Uh, Hive monitoring, so this automatic sensor IoT based monitoring of hives really got a strong start and foothold during this window of time. Several bigger tech entrants came in. Bee Hero is kind of the one of the leading ones in terms of money raised and technology development. Another one, the B Corp, came into existence, Nectar, and Beewise. So we'll talk more about those in a minute. Another side effect of technology during this time, this was not really the digital technology around, recording data and things for Hive, but FlowHive actually got its start because of digital technology, because of the power of the internet, the viral nature of crowdfunding. They broke records for crowdfunding on Indiegogo platform in 2015, and that was the reason that FlowHive exists, was because of that crowdfunding and the nature of the internet. So it's kind of again a side effect of the digital space that we're in, that FlowHive got came into existence. All right, so hopefully this isn't too dry. I mean, I love talking about this stuff and the history. And I recommend that you, if anything piques your interest, go chase that piece of the puzzle. Um, so 2020 to the present, and this is ongoing. And this slide here is really these big players. This is from a kind of a big tech digital lens right here. But there are plenty of other kind of players in the space as well, and I can talk more to those as well. But these are you saw from the 2015 to 2020, some of these came into existence. And Be Hero is again is kind of the top of the list. They are in precision pollination. They are essentially telling growers that they can guarantee a certain level of pollination with hives that have their sensors in them. And so they're giving the sensors to the beekeepers and serving as the broker between the beekeepers and the growers. So guaranteeing the beekeepers pollination contracts, things like that. But these are all sensors in the hive, okay? And then analyzing that data to say things about the hive itself, its hive health, its strength. In pollination, you get a contract for pollination based on the strength of the hive, or you guarantee, say, for an almond grower, that I'm going to have 8 frames of bees coming in there at this price. And traditionally, the way that was evaluated, you would go and you'd check, you'd have kind of checks of the frames of bees in the hive. But in with sensors, the concept is you don't need to do that. You can guarantee it through the sensors. This other one, Beewise, it's a very interesting one, and you can see the crazy amount of money that they have raised to date. And it's a box. This is like the most kind of futuristic thing that's out there, and it has colonies in this box, It's got automated visual sensors to check the hives, to check the frames, and it actually has little robotics in it that moves the frames around, things like that. And so they are kind of in this very futuristic, no humans involved, at least in the box itself. You do need to get bees in there to begin with humans. Um, and then this other one, the B Corp, they were part of this hive grading for almonds was kind of their niche, and they actually didn't make it, and they've sold their intellectual property and are out of that space now. Nectar is another one, and they are, I think, one of the bigger ones now in the actual apiary management software for commercial beekeepers. And actually, one of their primary tools or differentiators is they have an ID tag for a hive. And I may have talked about this before here, but identifying a hive is actually not a real easy thing to do, especially at scale. And so they kind of have a good solution for that problem. There's some other kind of interesting bee vectoring technologies. This is a group that uses the honeybees themselves to deliver product to an orchard or to to plants, and so they have a little tray that the bees go through, and then when they visit, it drops the whatever the product is um, on the plant. So that's kind of far-fetched sort of things. But again, these are like the big players, and on a smaller scale, there's still plenty of beekeeping apps out there. And like I said, some have come and gone. One of the original ones that were with us, the Bee Tight, they shut down. And again, there's any number of hive sensor products out there as well. When I gave my update for Apimondia at the last webinar, there was plenty of hive sensors, hive scale, hive monitoring vendors there at the Apimondia conference. So it's not going away. It's people are continuing to work on it.
We have
All right.
a question coming from
Okay.
Anthony, who might be relevant to this slide. Anthony,
Yeah.
would you like to? Um, you should be able to unmute now. Let's see if it's working. Are you able to unmute? Maybe not. Anthony, can you let us know if there's a different question, or maybe it's the question that you had in the box, which we can take at the end. Otherwise, maybe just write it down first, because I don't think it's allowing us to unmute you unless you're able to do that yourself. It doesn't look like it. Okay. Try to type in the question box would be great. Otherwise, maybe we can answer that first one from Anthony there, James, now or later, up to you.
Are you talking about the question on percentage of beekeepers using technology, et cetera, et cetera?
This is the one, yes, unless Anthony has something else that's
Okay.
relevant to this slide.
Yeah, I see a question there, but I don't know where it is in the flow. But the question I saw was, is there a breakout of percentage of beekeepers using technology from commercial, sideliner, and hobbyists? Um, I I could have some educated guesses, and my educated guess would be pretty low numbers in probably commercial beekeepers. I'm guessing it's less than 25%, um, and probably even lower for hobbyists would be my guess, based on kind of our numbers and how many users we have versus what we think the whole market is. So again, I don't know if that was your question or not, but if not, make sure you get the question that you really wanted to ask. All right. Okay, what's next? Oh, these I just threw some random, really. kind of interesting technology things that I've run across over the year. Eyes on Hives. I had by the way, with most of these folks, I know them. I know the creators. In some sense, I've met them, talked to them, had good conversations, and so Eyes on Hives. That was one that had a video looking at the entrance to a hive, evaluating it. Dr. Tasha Corey in my department has some of that as well. Um, uh, Jerry Brumenshank, he had an app where you could have it listen to the hive. There's another one I saw at Apimondia. Again, the concept is that, and we know this as beekeepers, when you listen to a hive, especially for a queenless hive, we all kind of have this notion that for a queenless hive, it's going to have this sort of roar. And so, are there other uh, audio signatures that can tell us something about the health of the hive? And so it's a fascinating space, and again, it's another data point that we should be able to use and might be able to use for health. So anyway, Jerry has that app. There's another one. Many of you have always asked us at Hive Tracks, can I just do voice recording of my inspection or voice guided inspections? And there was a group out of Greece several years ago that tried that. And it's probably more feasible today than it was then. But again, that's a piece that people have tried. Pollination with drones, again, artificial pollination. People are wanting to get rid of the bees, and just do it a different way. And then hive types, flow was the big one that had the crowdfunding, but there are plenty of others that are out there, whether it's a device or a hive type that have been driven by crowdfunding, and so that they get traction because they can get some funding to seed their development. All right, I want to get to Q&A, so let's just a few quick thoughts on AI, where I believe the biggest impact that we're going to see or are seeing. Image processing is one that's kind of a old school. It's been image processing has always been an area where digital technology has had a lot of promise and made great strides in how we analyze an image, what we can learn from analyzing the image. And there's been great advancements in, especially with plant and pollinator identification. We're using some of that inside Hive Tracks with our biodiversity monitoring. When we take images, we're classifying them, things like that. As I said, Varroa is a place where it's been used. Brood health, laying patterns, I think that's an easy one. I don't think there's been a lot of work. I've seen one app out there that kind of does some of that. And similar to that would be a population. So if I can just take an image of, say, the a frame, I can know what the population is. So again, image processing is one of those that I think will continue to develop. And as Hive Tracks, images are a big piece of what we do, that I think there's a great promise there. In addition, all of your LLMs that whether you use Gemini or Grok or ChatGPT or whatever, they're reasonable actually right now in some of their beekeeping advice. They can be customized. I've done an experiment with a student to create kind of an agent-like tool for beekeepers in particular, and combining that with what your observations are of the hive that we have in Hive Tracks right now. We have sort of a quasi recommendation engine, but it's pretty hard coded. But we believe we can, enhance that with some analysis and with using some LLM. So that's something that we're exploring, working on right now. So to me, those are the kind of two areas that I think AI has the most immediate promise. All right, where do we go from here? Well, one of my kind of philosophical groundings has always been that I like technology, but I don't want to get rid of the beekeeper, and I want to keep keeping bees. And I think most of us on this call are getting something besides kind of the utility out of the bees. It's a part of our joy and goodness of life is keeping the bees as part of that. And so wherever we go with technology, I want it to be as to give you an assist. I've always said that to give the beekeeper an assist, not to replace us. And the reason I have this box right here is it's got vestiges of some things that have gone away, like the Bee Informed Partnership. These are tags that I use for the Sentinel Apiary. Um, but I also write on the hive. Okay, so it just and there's a hive scale under this hive, so it's a mashup of old school plus new school plus some things that's come and gone. And that's just the way, the technology works. Some of it sticks. Some if the what's useful is going to stay around. And so that's kind of what we're about. And we want to, keep making our tools useful to you as a beekeeper and help you to be a bit better beekeeper, and have healthier bees, which will make you, enjoy it more. So, yeah, just a little philosophical commercial that I want the people to stay as beekeepers, or I want to stay keeping bees. Okay, let's get a few questions and answers. And Danny, if you want to look around in the Q&A and see if there's something there as well. Um, I'll just take a few here as I have time. I'll just look at the first one and what's the best monitoring device? That's a very tricky question. And by the way, most of my answers to any question are it depends, and that's true here. Part of it depends on your goal with the monitoring. Are you just curious? Do you just want to kind of see what's going on, or do you want something valuable out of it? You want to, is there some insight that you're trying to gain from it? And how much money are you willing to spend? Okay. And so again, depending on how you answer all those things, there's probably something out there that will satisfy what you want to do. I will say, just there are any number of new technologies that people are coming out with. Sometimes it's quite a bit of repeat of something that's already been done before. So again, you might want to see kind of how new is this, and how well tested is it. And that's the downfall of a lot of these monitoring devices is it's great conceptually, but in the field, it doesn't hold up to real conditions and real beekeeping conditions. That's been a big hurdle for folks to get across. So, um, all right, the second one, can you list for me all components a hive needs for going into winter? So it depends. Depends on your winter. Depends on where you are, how harsh your winter is going to be. In many circumstances, just dry, enough food, and a good population of healthy bees is all you need. Beyond that, if you're in super harsh conditions, then wrapping, things like that make sense. And you know, my Canadian friends, they definitely do that sort of thing. But if you're in more temperate, pretty much I'm more of a minimalist, and the less is more concept. But sometimes those things won't hurt, but the value might not be worth the effort. So suggestions to absorb moisture in the hive. There are great debates on ventilation and moisture in hives raging out there, so I'm not going to wade into it, except with my minimalist approach. I would, not worry about it so much. And again, if you have a dry inside, enough food, and healthy bees, the bees are going to generally take care of themselves. But again, there's all different ways of absorbing moisture with quilt boxes and things like that. So you can go study up on those. Um, how much moisture does uncapped honey have when overwintering? That I don't know. I guess it would depend. Again, different uncapped honeys have different moisture contents, right? And I don't know what that looks like over winter. That's something I haven't studied. I don't know. Next one. What if you have only one full box? Remove the rest. Yes, I think I kind of addressed that earlier. You want to get your space down as tight as possible. And I try to get down to one full box, and one full, like as full as possible would be best. But I will say sometimes you never know. You can have the puniest hive that you think there's no way this is going to make it through winter, and somehow it does. So I think sometimes our criteria don't match up completely with what's actually going on in the colony. There are some factors that we're not familiar with that help some survive. Likewise, there's some times that hives die that we don't understand completely what was going on inside there. But rule of thumb, just get it as tight as possible with the bees that are there. All right. Okay, and this is a recurring question. Anything in the works where hive tracks may integrate with sensors? Yes, there's always something in the works. Meaning we are always kind of in a position where we would like to integrate with sensors, and over the years, I've just never found the right one to integrate with, either from a technology standpoint or from a business standpoint. But definitely, we're aware and know that integrating with sensors would be a useful thing, and it's just a matter of time, I think, when that's going to happen. So I know that's an unsatisfactory answer, but that's the reality. All right. Last one, first season keeper. Do I need at least two deeps? No, you don't. You can go with single deeps. There, Ian Stepler in Canada has the kind of model for single deeps and kind of promoted that. Other people were already doing that as well, probably. But it's not necessarily required to have two deeps. A lot of people use two deeps as well. So again, some of it is it depends.
And maybe James, for the last time, just Stephanie, thank you for being so active in the chat as well. She just has a question at the end around the use of groups. Maybe we can take as the last
Yeah.
question, James.
So what's the question? Can you read it to me?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to use HiveTrack's app to run a community initiative to track forage resources. Will there be a future group setting where local users can download app and join a specific group code to report data for the project target? Example, find X tree in bloom in your area or find plant X or this milkweed.
Yeah.
This would increase app usage beyond just beekeepers.
Right. Yes. So uh, one of part of HiveTrack's roadmap and model is definitely going beyond the beekeepers and getting others involved in the data collection from the citizen science standpoint, or even just from a biodiversity monitoring standpoint, which we're going in that direction. So we have kind of more formal methods of evaluating biodiversity, and then the more unstructured, just kind of groups like you're talking about. And so definitely there are mechanisms in place. You could actually do it right now with the app the way it is, and the people that you want to record those plants, they can just download the app, the HiveTracks app as it is, and you can invite them into a group, and they can record the things in your area. Again, it's not tailored to the use case that you're talking about, but functionally it can already do that with the pieces that are there. So again, in the future, there will be again more customized versions of that for particular use cases, like perhaps like you're talking about, where you can get a focused group on this project and get them in quickly into the app. But again, right now that functionality is actually already there.
Right, fantastic. And unfortunately, Sharon, I think we are at time, but we can definitely answer your question offline. Thank you again for joining us, everyone. We really had fun exploring a little bit about the historical context of beekeeping and what to expect in November as we prepare for winter ahead. As usual, these monthly webinars take place on the last Tuesday of every month, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We hope you can join us next month. We've got a very special one prepared, so be on the lookout for that. Until then, happy beekeeping, and we'll see you soon.